name is Angeline Marks, and I'm playing Guardsman Leon Smith.
My name is Carolyn Smith, and I'm playing Protester Mary Vicicho.
And I'm Lindsay Callahan, and I'm playing President Richard M. Nixon. And we're doing a performance of
4 Dead in Ohio.
Kent State Massacre forces Nixon to reform his policies in Vietnam.
3, 2, 1.
Pigs off campus! Pigs off campus! My name is Mary Vicicho. I ran away from home to help with a revolution that could help change the world. I didn't want to sit at home and watch what many call the living room war on television. The average age of an American soldier in Vietnam was 19, and a good amount of the troops in general didn't want to be there, but had to be there because of the draft. And did you hear? President Nixon called us bums. Can you believe that? He's the bum. He's the one who said that he was going to decrease the number of troops in Vietnam, only to increase the number of troops by invading Cambodia. At the protest, 2 students threw lit flares into the Army ROTC building on campus and burnt it to the ground. Eventually, things began to calm down, though. The Army men and the students started to mingle. The whole thing felt more like a backyard barbecue rather than the protest. The students were just talking and handing out flowers until things started to change. Rocks were flying, tear gas was thrown, and worst of all, gunshots were fired.
My name is Leon Smith, and I was on the Kent State campus on May 4th, 1970. I was 23 that year. The National Guard and I were called out by Governor Rhodes because he felt that the protests on campus were getting out of hand. The whole thing was going fine. Some students were handing out flowers. Then they started throwing rocks at us. We were provoked. General Canterbury gave one of the other guardsmen a bullhorn to tell the students to disperse, saying it was an order and they must leave immediately. Yes, we got the order to throw tear gas, and I heard some other guardsmen around me complaining that somebody was going to get killed. I thought to myself, you don't have to be in a war to be in Vietnam. You don't need to be in Vietnam to be in a war. But at the time, we didn't know what would happen. When the students started throwing the canisters of gas back at us, we moved to the top of the hill to await further orders. That's when the shooting started. But at the time, we didn't know what would happen. Maybe 61 rounds altogether. I'm not sure. It was about noon, but it was over real fast. Then the screaming started.
When the shots went off, I didn't know what was going on until I saw my friend Jeffrey Miller lying face down on the ground. He had been shot dead. I just fell to the ground and started crying and screaming. I didn't know what else I could do. I later found out that I made at one of the protests, Sandra Schuer, was also killed. She was so pretty and inspiring. She didn't really care that I was only 14 like some of the others did. I'm just hoping that their deaths don't go unnoticed. They never wanted to die. None of us did. But I have to hope that by their lives ending, our country will change for the better.
I do not think that anyone who heard my comments at the Pentagon or who heard the tape recording of it had any doubt that when I talked about the bums and burning up the books and blowing up the campuses, I was referring to the arsonists at Kent State, Berkeley, Yale, and bombers like them. The Washington Post headline the next morning accurately reflected my meaning. Nixon denounces campus bums who burn books, set off bombs. However, the front page headline of the New York Times conveyed a slightly different meaning. Nixon puts bums label on some college radicals. Within a few days, it was the widespread impression I referred to all student protesters as bums. The media coverage and interpretation added fuel to the fires of dissent already getting out of control on many campuses. The National Student Association called for my impeachment, and editors from 11 Eastern colleges, including most Ivy League schools, ran a common editorial in their college newspapers calling for a nationwide academic strike. On Monday, May 4th, I was discussing my schedule with my assistant Haley. He seemed agitated and said, "Something just came over the wires about the demonstration at Kent State. The National Guard opened fire and some students were shot." I was stunned. I then asked if they were dead, and he responded, "I'm afraid so. No one knows why it happened." Once I received the names of the injured students, I sent out personal letters to each of their families, even though I knew words didn't help. However, I had to stand by my choices of warfare. For I had taken a new approach to the war when I gained the presidency. For I had created the program of Vietnamization, where I steadily removed a number of U.S. ground troops while still training the South Vietnamese soldiers to defend their own. However, at the same time, I escalated the U.S. airways over North Vietnam, bombing their supply and infiltration routes to Cambodia. But when this action failed, I decided to invade Cambodia. By doing this, I had planned to use Cambodia as a bargaining tool to end the Vietnam War. I didn't think things would escalate to where they did, to the point where I was criticized by many for bringing the war home. However, I knew there would be both military and political risks. And since I took those risks, I do assume full responsibility for them. And I can say it was one of the worst events of my presidency.
On May 7th, 1974, 8 of the guardsmen were put on trial for what had happened. Robert Murphy was the prosecutor. His argument was that there was no massive rush of students towards the guardsmen, no student within 60 feet of them. In fact, only 2 of the 13 people shot were shot in the front. During the trial, he called 33 witnesses to the stand, including 9 injured protesters. Each of them testified that the guardsmen did no harm.
Together, the 8 guardsmen on trial had 3 defense attorneys. C.D. Lambros defended guardsmen Pierce, Zoller, and Morris, and Bernard Stepinski defended guardsmen Schaefer, Perkins, McGee, McManus, and I was defended by Ed Wright. The defense attorneys all agreed on the same defense argument, in which they portrayed the crowd as crazy, frenzied rioters who were not exercising their legitimate constitutional rights. They also blamed Governor Rhodes, the university administrators, and our commanding officers for placing us in vulnerable positions in the first place.
But the prosecution took the statements of the guardsmen previously said that they aimed directly at the students.
The defense tried to poke holes in the credibility of the witnesses with contradicting statements. One of the witnesses who testified for the prosecution turned out to be one of the best for the defense. His name was John Cleary, and he was one of the injured students at the riots. On trial, he was confronted with statements he had given to the FBI in 1970, saying that the guardsmen looked panicked and that the rockets students thrown were as large as softballs. But on trial, he said that he had been on medication at the time. When he made the statement,